never believe it, but I'm still in Boise, Idaho, and we're looking at a river here. This is the Boise River. It's coming down off the mountains. You can hear the water. This is really cold water because it's coming up from the high altitudes, and it is this river that really creates and gives us all the potatoes, the Idaho potatoes, and it's also a beautiful farm area, especially for cattle. And so Boise, Idaho is known for its cattle. It's known for its potatoes. But that's not what we're going to talk about. We're talking about this book. Muslims are known for this book, and this is their book, and this is their revelation. And it's fascinating to me because Muslims have always said that this book is relevant for the 20th century, for the 21st century, for every century. And we've always disputed that. And we've been going through this series now, looking at chapter 4 and chapter 2 of the Quran. We're looking at those. Later on, we'll be looking at chapter 55 and 56 at Paradise. But one of the things we've been looking at is asking the question concerning about the problem of women in those chapters. And it's fascinating because as we looked at all the verses in chapter 4, verse 3, with the fact that man can have up to 4 wives, a woman is not permitted to have 4 husbands, so there's already inequality in marriage. A few verses later in 11 that the sister gets half the inheritance that the brother gets when the father dies. And in also verse 24, we looked at 2 different things in verse 24 actually. One had to do with the concubinage, and the other had to do with the muta marriages. And then we went to verse 34 and looked at the fact that a man can beat his wife if she displeases him. We then moved into chapter 2, verse 282, and remarked how that in a court case, the woman gets half the testimony as a man. And the reasons why, according to Muhammad, when Aisha asked him, was because women are less intelligent and more disobedient. And I had a struggle with that one because that is not the case. And as I mentioned, it certainly was not the case on our team. The people I work with, the women are the most intelligent and are the most capable in our ministry. We then went to verse 223 of chapter 2, and we ended with that. Now what I want to do is end with one more verse. And this is the verse on halal marriages. Now some of you may know what I'm talking about, especially you Muslims. Halal marriages are these marriages that are done at the point of divorce. Remember in chapter 4 verse 3, a man can have up to 4 wives. If she displeases him, after what we noticed in chapter 4 verse 34, and he admonishes her, throws her from the bed, and beats her, he can still divorce her simply by saying talak, talak, talak 3 times. I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. If he says it once or twice, she's not divorced. If he does it the 3rd time, then she is divorced. There is no more marriage, and that has ruptured the marriage. Now, what can happen afterwards is that there are many men that you know, and probably some of you who are watching, this has happened to you, when you've divorced your wife and you realize, oh dear, I didn't want to do that. I did it on a fit of anger. Maybe I did it impulsively. I don't really want to be divorced from her. According to chapter 2, verse 230, it stipulates that you cannot have her back. You cannot bring her back once you have said it 3 times. That's all you need, is say it 3 times. So what has happened is chapter 2 verse 230 says what he needs to do. And it says very clearly, and if he has divorced her the 3rd time, then she, not him, remember the man's done the divorcing, but look what the woman has to do. She is not lawful to him thereafter until she has married another husband. Then when the other husband divorces her, it is no sin on both of them that they reunite. That means that the first 2 reunite. Now let's unpack that a little bit. That is known as halal marriages. So the halal marriages start from the premise that if a man inadvertently says talak, talak, talak 3 times and he realizes that was a mistake, it's not incumbent upon him to do anything. The wife has to get remarried. Now, back on April 5th, 2017, BBC had a special program on the Victoria of Derbyshire program about these halal marriages. And I remember I was in London at that time. I was informed about it. I wanted to go and see it. And I went up. It was on the front page of the internet site for BBC. And here was this whole program on women who had to marry other men, had to marry strangers, it says, in order for them to go back to their husbands. And they said that in London, or in England especially, this is a real problem amongst the Pakistani community, because many in the Pakistani community, in order to find husbands, they have to go up on the internet, and you can go up and Google it on the internet, and you will see there's lots of advertisements in Britain and in Pakistan and in India for these husbands, these temporary husbands. The problem was, in Britain at least, many of these men, when they put themselves forward as being a husband to have intercourse with these women, they were then supposed to write a certificate of divorce so that she could go back to her original husband, and they weren't doing that. What's more, in Britain, the going rate to have these temporary marriages is £2,500. That's over $3,000. The woman has to pay the man $3,000, £2,500, just to sleep with him. And these men were realizing, hold on a minute, I'm getting lots of money, plus I get to bed this woman anytime I want. And what was happening is they were demanding they come back the next week, and the next week, and the next week, and this continued on and on and on. And they were not giving a certificate of divorce. So what happened was many of the imams stepped in, and the imams said that we will do this. So in a number of cases across Britain, according to this program, the imams had an anteroom where they had a bed, and the woman would come down after her husband had divorced her. The woman would come down, pay the imam £2,500. He would go take her into the anteroom. They would have sex, penetrative intercourse. He would then come out, sign the divorce, give it to her so she could go back to her husband. Now, stop and think that through. I don't even know where to go with this. As a Christian and as a husband who has a wife, and I have a wedding ring on my finger that says that I am dedicated and committed to my wife for life, and that is something that God instituted from the very beginning in Genesis chapter 2. Where in the world is this notion that somehow, if your husband gets upset, the woman has to pay for the halal marriages out of her own pocket, has to go sleep with another man, not in this case, not even a stranger, the imam of the man himself. And then somehow that makes it right for him to go back to their husband. Where in the world is the God of Islam coming out? I don't know where he's getting any logic in this. I've asked Muslims. I remember that very next Sunday after this came out in 2017, I got up on a ladder and I said, Muslims, can you explain this to me as a male? How can you let your wife go and sleep with your imam, knowing that you're going to see that imam the next Friday, knowing that he slept with your wife? What in the world does that do to your marriage vows? What does that do to your relationship with your wife? And how in the world does that make you holy again? What in the world is going on here? And yet it's right here in the Quran. It's not a thing that they could explain. It's not a thing that they talked about whether they liked it or disliked it. All they said is, we really don't. It's what the Quran says. It is right here in chapter 2, verse 230. So I ask and I implore you, Muslims, see how this cheapens women. See how this cheapens marriage. See how this cheapens me as a husband. I would never want my wife, on my own stupidity, my own ignorance, having to pay the price for my own ignorance. Stop and think that through one step further. In chapter 6, verse 164 of the Quran, and in chapter 53, verse 38 of the Quran, it says that nobody can pay the guilt of another. No one can take on the guilt of another. Who do you think's taking on the guilt here? In chapter 2, verse 230, if not the woman, if not the wife. It's the woman that has to go and have sex with a stranger. It's the woman that has to go and have sex with the imam. It's the woman that has to pay the £2,500. If that doesn't show me that she's taken on the guilt of her husband, I don't know what does. So for heaven's sakes, people, can you see how this book has nothing to do with me, has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with today or any day? This is not a book for here. It is not a book for anywhere. And we've been saying this over and over. There's yet another example of how this book, maybe for the 7th century it made sense, but it does not make any sense for the 21st century. Anyhow, it's hard to talk about these, but we need to bring them out. Here I am in Boise, Idaho. Never been here before. On this beautiful river, you can hear the burbling as the water goes by. What a nice environment, what a nice atmosphere. God bless you. This is Jay.